Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We're just going to get started right now. I'm Scott Weathers. It's a pleasure to be here at Piecemeal Pies. Thank you so much, Justin, for hosting us. I'm our economic justice organizer at Rights and Democracy. It's an honor to be speaking about one fair wage today. We've got a lot of really great speakers, and so I'm going to keep it very brief. We're going to get started right now with Saru Jayaraman, who's the president of One Fair Wage. So I'm really excited to hear from Saru. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? Thank you for having me in Vermont. It's nice to be here. Sorry I brought rain. But my name is Saru. I am the president of One Fair Wage. I'm also a professor at UC Berkeley in California. So I've come a long way to be here with you, but so glad to be here with you in Vermont because I think something really incredible and historic is happening around the country and is about to happen in Vermont. So the restaurant industry, which I've been organizing in for the last 20 years, has been one of the largest and fastest growing private sector employers in the United States and in Vermont for many, many decades. But it's been the absolute lowest paying employer in the US and in Vermont for generations, dating all the way back to emancipation of slavery. Pre-emancipation, tipping in the United States and in Vermont was an extra or bonus on top of a wage. It was always something given to workers from feudal times in Europe on top of a wage or a salary as an extra or a bonus. When it came to the States, it came right before emancipation in the 1850s. And at emancipation, two industries sought the ability to essentially extend slavery by hiring newly free black slaves, not pay them anything at all, and have them live entirely on this new concept that had just come from Europe called tipping. So in America, the hospitality industry in America uniquely mutated tipping from being an extra or bonus on top of a wage, as it had always been, frankly, for centuries, to becoming a replacement for wages as a way to have continued free black labor. That is the only reason we have a sub-minimum wage today, is because the United States hospitality industry mutated tipping in this way. So we had a $0 wage at emancipation for mostly black women restaurant workers who were told you get nothing, you live on tips. That was made law in 1938 as part of the New Deal, when everybody got the right to the federal minimum wage for the first time, except for millions of black workers, black women in particular, who excluded. And we went from $0 in 1938 all the way up to $2.13 an hour, which is the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers in the United States. And of course, not that much higher here in the great, wonderful state of Vermont. Vermont continues to be one of 43 states in the United States that persists with this legacy of slavery. And today it is an overwhelming majority workforce of women. Over 2/3 of these workers are women working on tips, living on a sub-minimum wage, told your tips have to bring you to the full minimum wage, and not making enough to make ends meet. Tipped workers, even pre-pandemic, had twice the rate of poverty of other workers, 3 times the usage of food stamps, and had the absolute highest rates of sexual harassment of any industry in the United States because they had to put up with so much to get those tips. There are 7 states that got rid of this legacy of slavery many decades ago. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Minnesota, Montana, and Alaska all require a full minimum wage with tips on top, have for decades, and actually, despite everything you're going to hear from the National Restaurant Association and the Vermont Restaurant Association, we actually have restaurants in California. I invite you to come visit me. We have restaurants, and I'm sorry to tell you, we actually have more restaurants than you do here in Vermont. The industry is booming in these 7 states. They're not all blue states. Alaska is included, very seasonal state. And these states have higher restaurant sales per capita than Vermont, higher job growth in the restaurant industry than Vermont, higher small business growth rates than Vermont, and 1/2 the rate of sexual harassment in the restaurant industry in those states. Because when you pay a woman a full wage, she doesn't have to put up with as much from the customer. She gets tips. In fact, our tipping average in Alaska has the highest tipping average of any state in the US, much higher than Vermont's tipping average. But they've had a full wage forever, and women in the state of Alaska do not have to put up with so much because they're not entirely reliant on the tips. They get tips, but it's an extra or bonus on top of the wage as it was always intended to be. So listen, this was a problem and an injustice pre-pandemic. With the pandemic, everything has changed, everything. 6 million restaurant workers lost their jobs in March of 2020, and 2/3 told us that they actually couldn't get unemployment insurance because in most states they were told their wages were too low to qualify for benefits. Then they went back to work. In the summer of 2020, millions of workers told us tips went way down because sales went down, harassment went way up, and really the breaking point, two breaking points. One, we heard from thousands of women across the country. I'm regularly asked, take off your mask so I can see how cute you are before I decide how much I want to tip you. Take off your mask so I can see your pretty face and your pretty smile before I decide how much I want to tip. That was one breaking point for a lot of women. Another breaking point was being asked to enforce COVID protocols, masks, sit 6 feet apart, show us your Vax card, on the same people from whom they had to get tips to survive. It was an impossible situation. They got tipped less. We had members who were punched in the face for enforcing these rules or even shot. One worker was shot for trying to enforce these rules. And that was it. 1.2 million workers have left this industry. Of those who remain, 54%, that's more than half, say they're leaving, and 80% say the only thing that would make them come back is a full livable wage with tips on top. And I'm sure you are seeing the help wanted signs everywhere. I am sure you are experiencing what we're experiencing everywhere, which is massive staffing crisis, the worst in the history of this industry in the US. And it has caused something miraculous, truly miraculous. We have tracked thousands of restaurants across the country and dozens here in Vermont that voluntarily have moved from a sub-minimum wage to a full minimum wage with tips on top. We've been tracking them off Indeed postings. We're seeing so many restaurants that used to pay 6 and 7 or 5, now paying 15 and 20 because it's the only way to get staff to come back. And in that context where everything is changing, wages are going up, workers are demanding more, the opposition to this issue has changed dramatically. And so as a result of that, in July, we had our first big victory in a long time. Michigan, ahead of Vermont, just became the 8th state to end the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers in July. It was a really huge victory. We are on the ballot this November in Washington, D.C. to go from $5 for tipped workers to $16. We are on the ballot in Portland, Maine this November to go from $6 to $18 plus tips. And I want to ask you, what happens when workers in Vermont hear that they can get 18 in Portland? You're already suffering from a staffing crisis. Might you actually lose some people to places that are going to be paying more very soon? Besides these 3 places, Michigan, DC, and Portland, we've got bills moving in 10 states in January, including Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Connecticut, New York, Maryland, Colorado, all over the country. Bills are moving to end the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers, frankly, because most state legislators are realizing there is no future for this industry. There is no way this industry can survive with enough staff unless wages go up, because wages have been artificially stagnated for so long based on a history of structural racism. So I want to say we're in a historic moment, and I want to say that Vermont has already been at the forefront of this history. You were one of the first states to end slavery in the United States, in North America. You were one of the first places to end slavery. So let's make Vermont one of the first places in the US to end this legacy of slavery before it gets too late and we don't have enough workers anymore that really want to work in this industry. So I'm so grateful to RAD and to the state legislators that are moving this bill and to the workers and employers who are part of this movement. And I want to say we have got to get this done in this spring session. Otherwise, there cannot be a path forward for the restaurant industry in Vermont. When so many states around you are raising wages, we have to make sure this happens in Vermont this spring. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Saru, for your incredible words and for your leadership on this topic. Our next speaker, I'm really, really excited to introduce. When this next speaker and I first spoke, I didn't know how the conversation was going to go beforehand, but within a minute or two, we were finishing each other's sentences. And so I'm really, really glad to have this partnership with Piecemeal Pies. I'm so impressed with their business model, and I'm really glad to be able to let Justin Barrett speak and tell us all about the incredible work that he's doing with Piecemeal Pies. So Justin, please.
Thank you, Scott and Saru. The tips, welcome everyone to Piecemeal Pies in White River Junction, Vermont. Eliminating the sub-minimum tip minimum wage is long overdue. I've worked in too many industry establishments where this encourages disparity amongst all the workers. And we work in an industry that is encouraging community and respect for our customers. We need to be doing that for each other, especially in a seasonal environment like Vermont, where we could be having a really great 2 weeks, but then our revenue will drop 30% in the after foliage. And this doesn't allow our workers to have a consistent paycheck. So we have developed a model here at Piecemeal Pies. We've been experimenting for a little while, and during the pandemic, it really cemented that this is the way that we need to go. All of our meals, all of our checks include an 18% surcharge. Every single penny of that goes directly back to our employees. This completely takes the burden off of our customers to tip at all. So if they would like to put some extra cash, that's great. We encourage it. But we've also learned during the pandemic that people don't like to tip on takeaway, which is the only way that our industry was able to survive. Well, the people preparing your food and packaging your food are still humans, and they still deserve that acknowledgement. So we function off of about a $20 check average, and there's only so high that we can go and stay in business. So we start everyone at minimum wage or higher if they're over 18, which is pretty great for a coffee shop. And then this 18% surcharge adds an average of $5 to $8 an hour on top of everyone's paycheck. So when people are tipping, whether they realize it or not, they're tipping on the full experience. And that's the baker firing up the ovens in the morning to the person mopping the floors at the end of the day. Not that person that they're directly interacting with, that they may be disrespecting. So that is why we take that 18% in payroll, which it holds us as owners accountable to ensure how that's distributed. And then it goes to every single person evenly based on the hours they worked. So this is a model that's working really well. We're duplicating it in Stowe at our new location, and really think Vermont can be at the forefront of being a model for how the service industry can work, especially in a rural community.